Ladies and gentlemen, good day. Today I want to speak to you about an important and profound aspect of our spiritual and emotional lives, the connection between us and the divine. In our human journey, it's easy to make mistakes, to stray from the path, and unintentionally cause pain, sometimes even to the heart of God. But here's the good news. Healing and reconciliation are always within our reach. I will share 6 key points on how we can make it right and restore our bond with God to begin the process of healing and reconciliation. The first and perhaps most crucial step is to acknowledge the disconnect. This is where the journey towards making things right begins. But what does it mean to acknowledge the disconnect? And why is it so significant? Because often in life we get caught up in the busyness of the world and the complexity of our emotions. We might ignore, suppress, or justify our actions, thinking they are insignificant or that we haven't done anything wrong. However, it's essential to reflect honestly on how our thoughts, actions, and attitudes have affected our relationship with God. The disconnect happens when we act out of alignment with our highest self, when we act out of fear, anger, selfishness, or pride, instead of love, compassion, and wisdom. And by the way, the joy that comes from being consistent, to acknowledge the disconnect is to be brutally honest with ourselves. It means recognizing the times when we've allowed our egos to take over, when we've disregarded God's guidance, or when we've hurt others in ways that damage not only our relationships with them, but also our relationship with the divine. This disconnect doesn't always happen in dramatic moments of betrayal or wrongdoing. Sometimes it's subtle, small compromises, indifference, or neglect that accumulate over time and lead to a loss of connection. When we acknowledge this disconnect, we stop denying or deflecting responsibility. We understand that we are co-creators of our reality and that the choices we make matter. It's about taking ownership, not in a way that leads to shame or guilt, but in a way that empowers us to change. By acknowledging the hurt we may have caused, whether consciously or unconsciously, we open the door to healing and transformation. In the context of a relationship with the divine, acknowledging the disconnect means recognizing that we have moved away from love, from faith, and from trust. It's acknowledging that we may have acted in ways that caused suffering not only to others but to ourselves as well. This is a humbling and courageous process, but it is also deeply liberating. When we admit where we have strayed, we also begin to recognize the ways in which God's love has always been present, even in the moments when we were unaware or disconnected. The act of acknowledging the disconnect is not just about highlighting what is wrong, but also about rediscovering the love and grace that have always been available to us, even in our most disconnected state. End quote. Ultimately, this first step, acknowledging the disconnect, is about cultivating an authentic relationship with ourselves and with God. It invites us to look deeply within, to face our shadows, and to be real about where we stand. And when we do this, we create the space necessary for forgiveness, healing, and the restoration of the bond that we share with the divine. It's in this moment of honesty that true transformation can begin, because only when we acknowledge where we are can we begin to move toward where we truly want to be. Self-awareness is the ability to honestly and clearly observe and understand our own thoughts, feelings, motivations, and behaviors. It is an essential aspect of personal growth and healing, especially when seeking to restore our relationship with God. Without self-awareness, we may repeat the same mistakes without recognizing their impact, or even realize the ways in which we have drifted away from our divine connection. Cultivating deep self-awareness means taking the time to examine ourselves, our internal landscape, in an objective, non-judgmental way. This is not about criticizing or shaming ourselves, but about understanding who we truly are beneath the surface. It requires us to pause and reflect on the thoughts that drive us, the emotions we experience, and the patterns in our behavior. When we are truly aware of ourselves, we begin to see more clearly how our choices align or misalign with the higher values and love that we aspire to embody. One of the key aspects of deep self-awareness is the recognition of our triggers. those specific situations or emotions that lead us to act in ways that are out of alignment with our highest intentions. For example, fear, insecurity, jealousy, and anger are common triggers that can cause us to act in harmful ways toward others or even toward ourselves. When we aren't aware of these triggers, we can unconsciously fall into negative patterns of thought and behavior that separate us from the love of God and the greater good. By cultivating self-awareness, we can begin to take responsibility for these patterns. Instead of reacting impulsively or defensively when triggered, we can pause and observe our thoughts and emotions. This moment of pause gives us the power to choose how we want to respond, rather than letting our emotions or unconscious habits dictate our actions. It is through this awareness that we can break free from cycles of hurt, disappointment, and confusion. Self-awareness also helps us understand the deeper motivations behind our actions. Sometimes we might engage in behaviors that harm ourselves or others because of unmet needs, such as the need for validation, love, or security. Recognizing these unmet needs helps us understand the root causes of our behavior, which is the first step in healing. Rather than acting out of these unmet needs, we can learn to address them in healthier ways by seeking God's guidance, fostering healthier relationships, or engaging in personal growth practices that nurture our soul. In the context of reconnecting with God, self-awareness allows us to see how far we've drifted or how close we've become to the divine. It brings clarity to the choices we've made and helps us discern where our intentions and actions may need adjustment. This is not about perfection, but about honest self-reflection and the willingness to grow. Michael, adjective. Cultivating self-awareness also invites us to recognize the divine presence within us. As we grow in awareness, we begin to see that we are not separate from God. Our true nature is connected to divine love, wisdom, and purpose. Understanding ourselves more deeply reveals the layers of our soul that align with the essence of the Creator. We begin to recognize that the disconnection we feel may be more about forgetting our true identity than it is about God moving away from us. Self-awareness reconnects us with the truth of who we are, and in doing so, we restore our connection to the divine. In conclusion, cultivating deep self-awareness is a transformative process. It is the lens through which we can see both our light and our shadow. Through self-awareness, we gain the clarity necessary to make better choices, heal past wounds, and move toward a more profound and loving relationship with ourselves, others, and ultimately with surrendering to the healing process is perhaps one of the most powerful yet challenging aspects of restoring our connection with the divine. It involves letting go of control, trusting in God's plan, and allowing ourselves to be transformed by the love and grace that is always available to us. But what does it truly mean to surrender? And why is it so crucial in our spiritual journey? The concept of surrender. At its core, surrender is not about giving up or resigning ourselves to fate. It's about relinquishing the need to control every outcome. In our human nature, we often want to dictate how our lives should unfold. We set goals, make plans, and expect things to happen on our timeline. When life doesn't go as we envisioned, we may feel frustrated, lost, or even disconnected from God. In our aberration, we may feel frustrated, lost, or even disconnected from God. However, surrendering to the healing process means recognizing that we are not in charge of everything. There are forces greater than ourselves that are guiding our path, and these forces, whether you call it God, the universe, or divine wisdom, are always working for our highest good. Surrender isn't about passivity, it's about active trust. It's about being open to the unfolding of life, even when we don't fully understand it. When we surrender, we let go of resistance and allow ourselves to be part of a much bigger divine picture. The role of faith in surrender? Faith is the cornerstone of surrender. To surrender, we must have faith that God's plan for us is one of healing, growth, and love. It's trusting that no matter how difficult our circumstances may seem, there is a divine purpose working in our lives. Faith allows us to release the burden of needing to fix everything ourselves and trust that God is at work behind the scenes. Sometimes, this surrender requires letting go of long-held beliefs, expectations, or attachments. We may hold on tightly to old patterns, habits, or identities that no longer serve us, but we are afraid to let them go. Surrender is the process of gently loosening our grip on those things and allowing ourselves to be transformed. It's accepting that the past is gone and that we are in the process of becoming something new. Healing requires patience and time. Surrendering to the healing process also means accepting that healing is not always immediate. In today's fast-paced world, we often want quick fixes and instant results. But true healing, especially on a spiritual level, takes time. When we surrender, we let go of the impatience and frustration that often comes with wanting things to happen on our timeline. We allow God to work in us, trusting that the healing we seek will come when the time is right. During this process, it's important to be kind and gentle with ourselves. Healing isn't linear, it's a journey with ups and downs. There may be moments of doubt, pain, or even setbacks, but through surrender, we learn to navigate these moments with grace. We remember that God's love is not conditional on our perfection, but on our willingness to return to Him again and again, even when we fall short. Surrendering the ego. One of the biggest barriers to surrendering is the ego. The ego is the part of us that wants to control, to protect, and to assert itself. It tells us that we must have all the answers and that we should rely solely on our own strength. But true surrender involves letting go of the ego's need for control and embracing humility. It's about recognizing that we are not separate from God, but part of a larger divine whole. In surrender, we let go of the belief that we can do it all on our own and open ourselves to the transformative power of God's grace. The healing power of surrender. When we surrender to the healing process, we allow ourselves to be filled with divine love and peace. In this state of surrender, we release the burden of guilt, shame, and regret and make space for the healing energy to flow freely. This surrender doesn't mean we stop taking action. It means that our actions are guided by trust and love rather than fear or resistance. We do our part, but we trust God to handle the parts beyond our control. In conclusion, surrendering to the healing process is an essential step in restoring our connection with God. It involves letting go of the need to control, trusting in divine timing, and allowing ourselves to be transformed by God's love and wisdom. It is a profound act of faith and humility where we acknowledge that healing is not something we do alone, but something we allow God to do through us. Another part of life that means forgiveness and liberty, where we acknowledge that healing is not something we do alone, but something we allow God to do through us. By surrendering, we align ourselves with the divine flow of life, and in doing so, we make space for true healing and restoration to take place. Compassion and forgiveness are two of the most powerful tools for healing, both for ourselves and our relationship with God. They are the keys to restoring peace within our hearts and to mending the wounds that often arise when we experience disconnect or strife in our lives. But what do these terms truly mean, and why are they so vital in the process of reconnecting with the divine? Compassion is the ability to understand, share, and empathize with the suffering of others. It goes beyond sympathy, which is simply feeling sorry for someone's pain. Compassion involves a deep sense of connection, feeling with others, understanding their struggles, and offering kindness and care. When we practice compassion, we are not only extending grace to others, but also to ourselves. In the context of our relationship with God, compassion means recognizing that everyone, including ourselves, is on a journey of growth. We all make mistakes, face challenges, and experience pain. Compassion reminds us that we are all human, and it helps us see beyond the surface to the deeper soul that connects us all. When we have compassion, we are less likely to judge, criticize, or distance ourselves from those who have hurt us. Instead, we recognize that everyone is doing the best they can with the understanding and resources they have at the time. Compassion softens our hearts and opens us up to forgiveness. When we are compassionate toward ourselves, we stop the cycle of self-criticism and guilt. We learn to see our mistakes as opportunities for growth and healing, not as defining failures. We embrace our humanity, acknowledging our imperfections while still striving to be better. Compassion allows us to release the burden of judgment and replace it with understanding and love. And we begin to release the burden of judgment and replace it with understanding and love. Forgiveness is perhaps one of the most transformative acts we can practice. It is the act of releasing resentment, anger, or the desire for revenge against those who have hurt us. It doesn't mean we condone or accept the wrongdoing, but it means we choose to let go of the emotional hold it has over us. Forgiveness is an act of freedom. When we hold on to grudges, bitterness, or unforgiveness, we keep ourselves bound to the past and to the pain. Our hearts become heavy with resentment, and this emotional weight creates distance between us and God. Holding on to anger can block the flow of divine love and healing in our lives. In order to reconcile with God, we must first reconcile with ourselves and others through forgiveness. This process isn't always easy, especially when the pain we've experienced feels deep and unjust. But when we forgive, we free ourselves from the cycle of hurt and open ourselves to healing. Forgiveness is not an instant fix. It's a journey, often requiring time and effort. But each step toward forgiveness is a step toward liberation and peace. When we forgive others, we release the emotional toxins that poison our hearts and minds. We let go of the story we've told ourselves about the person who hurt us, understanding that their actions were shaped by their own struggles, pain, and limitations. Forgiving others allows us to view them through the lens of compassion rather than judgment. It's an act that invites peace not only into our own hearts, but into the relationship as well. Forgiveness doesn't mean that we must continue to engage with toxic or harmful individuals in our lives. It doesn't mean allowing others to continually hurt us. Rather, it's about releasing the emotional burden and choosing not to carry that pain any longer. It's about freeing ourselves from the negative energy of the past and allowing ourselves to move forward with a lighter heart. Self-forgiveness is just as important, if not more so, than forgiving others. It is often harder to forgive ourselves because we hold ourselves to high standards, or we internalize guilt and shame from past mistakes. But God's love is unconditional, and He does not wish for us to carry the weight of our past actions indefinitely. To practice self-forgiveness, we must first acknowledge the harm we've caused, whether to others or ourselves. We must reflect on what we have learned from our mistakes, and then let go of the guilt that no longer serves us. Self-forgiveness is an act of grace, a reminder that we are worthy of love, growth, and second chances. When we forgive ourselves, we open the door to self-compassion and begin to heal from the inside out. When we practice compassion and forgiveness, we align ourselves with God's infinite love. These two acts are essential in returning to the heart of the divine because they mirror the very nature of God. God's love for us is filled with compassion and forgiveness. He sees our flaws, our struggles, and our mistakes, but He does not judge us harshly. Instead, He offers us His grace and the opportunity for transformation. By extending compassion to others and forgiving both them and ourselves, we emulate this divine love. We allow God's presence to flow freely through us, healing our hearts and restoring our connection to Him. Compassion and forgiveness create space for divine healing and renewal to take place, both in our relationship with God and in our relationships with others. To restore what was broken in our relationship with God, we must practice compassion and forgiveness. This involves both extending grace to others and releasing ourselves from the grip of anger and resentment. When we do so, we align ourselves with God's unconditional love, opening the door to healing, peace, and spiritual restoration. Compassion softens our hearts, and forgiveness frees us from the chains of the past. These practices, both toward ourselves and others, are essential in healing the disconnect we may feel and returning to a place of divine love and connection. Recommitting to your purpose is a transformative step in healing and reconnecting with the divine. It involves reestablishing the deep connection between your life and the higher calling you are meant to fulfill. This step is not only about discovering your purpose, but also about choosing to live in alignment with that purpose every day. It's about remembering why you are here and in doing so, reawakening your connection to God. Each of us has a divine purpose, a unique calling that reflects the very essence of who we are and who we are meant to become. This purpose is not merely about success, accolades, or material achievements. It is about living authentically and fulfilling the role you were created to play in this world, in alignment with the values, love, and wisdom of the divine. Recommitting to your purpose is an invitation to step back into the flow of divine energy. When we stray from our purpose, we often feel disconnected, disoriented, or lost. The key to restoring our relationship with God is to remember that our purpose is rooted in a higher plan, one that connects us to the greater good and to others. This divine purpose is not just for our own personal gain, but for the healing, growth, and well-being of the world around us. Life is full of distractions. There are many forces that pull us away from our true calling: fear, doubt, external expectations, and the demands of daily life. The ego often steps in, telling us that success or happiness can only be found by following conventional paths. Yet, when we stray too far from our authentic self, the disconnect between us and the divine becomes more evident. The sense between us and the divine becomes more evident. Recommitting to our purpose means choosing to listen to the still, small voice within that guides us toward our true path. It means not allowing the pressures of the world to determine our worth or direction, but instead trusting that God has placed us here for a reason. It is an act of faith to resist the urge to conform and to instead embrace the divine blueprint that has been uniquely designed for us. To reconnect with God, we must consciously align ourselves with the divine calling we are meant to fulfill. This requires reflection, introspection, and a willingness to let go of what no longer serves us. Recommitting to your purpose means letting go of distractions, whether they are toxic relationships, negative thought patterns, or habits that lead us away from our truth. This alignment is not always easy, and there will be moments of doubt or fear. However, when we make the conscious decision to stay true to our purpose, we are aligning with the flow of divine will. It is like returning to the river that will carry us to where we are meant to be. We begin to trust that every step we take in alignment with our true purpose is a step that brings us closer to God's heart. One of the most powerful ways to recommit to your purpose is to live in service to others. The divine calling within each of us is not solely for our benefit. It is also for the benefit of those around us. Our purpose often involves contributing to the greater good, uplifting others, and embodying love in action. When we serve others, we open ourselves up to divine connection. Service aligns us with the heart of God because it reflects the selfless love that God has for all of creation. Whether it's through small acts of kindness, supporting loved ones, or engaging in meaningful work, service reconnects us to our divine purpose and reaffirms that we are part of something much greater than ourselves. Recommitting to your purpose is a form of healing because it restores us to our true selves. It brings us back into alignment with the divine, helping us to let go of confusion, doubt, and the false identities we may have adopted. When we reconnect with our purpose, we begin to heal not only our relationship with God, but also our relationships with others and ourselves. This healing is often gradual. It requires patience and persistence. There may be moments when the path seems unclear, but by staying true to our purpose, we continue moving forward, trusting that God is guiding our steps. Recommitting to your purpose is a profound step in reconnecting with God. It's about remembering that you are here for a reason, that your life has meaning, and that your unique gifts and talents have the power to heal and transform. By aligning with your higher calling and living in service to others, you tap into the divine energy that flows through you. Recommitting to your purpose reawakens your soul's connection to God and invites divine love and wisdom into every aspect of your life. Through this process, you rediscover who you truly are and what you are here to do, bringing you closer to God's heart and the true fulfillment that comes from living a purpose-driven life. End quote. Gratitude and trust are two essential elements in restoring our connection with God. They allow us to move from a state of frustration and longing to one of peace and acceptance. When we practice gratitude, we acknowledge the many blessings that God has already provided, shifting our focus away from what is lacking to what is abundant in our lives. Trust, on the other hand, is about surrendering control and accepting that God's plan is greater than anything we could imagine. Together, gratitude and trust form a foundation that enables us to heal, grow, and ultimately return to God's embrace. Now, the gratitude at which we are here today is the gratitude under which we return to God's embrace. Gratitude is the practice of recognizing and appreciating the good in our lives, no matter how big or small. It is easy to focus on what we don't have, what we wish were different, or what we perceive as missing in our lives. However, gratitude asks us to shift our perspective. When we cultivate a mindset of thankfulness, we begin to see the gifts in the present moment. This shift in perspective allows us to reconnect with the divine presence that is always with us. Gratitude also helps to release the negativity, dissatisfaction, and frustration that can create distance between us and God. It opens our hearts, allowing the divine love to flow more freely. When we take the time to reflect on all that we have been given, our health, our loved ones, the beauty of nature, the opportunities to grow, we are reminded of God's constant presence and care. Gratitude, in essence, is a form of worship. It is an acknowledgement that everything we have is a gift from God, and by appreciating those gifts, we honor the divine. When we face struggles or hardships, it can be challenging to practice gratitude. But in those moments, gratitude becomes even more powerful. It is in the face of adversity that we are called to remember that even in the difficult times, God is present, guiding us, and shaping us for greater things. Expressing gratitude for the lessons, strength, and resilience we gain from challenges helps us to see them through a divine lens. Trusting in divine timing is a natural companion to gratitude. Often, when we are in pain or facing difficulties, we feel the urge to rush through the process, to want things fixed or resolved immediately. We may question why things are not happening according to our plan or timeline, but divine timing teaches us that everything unfolds in perfect order even when we cannot see the bigger picture. Trusting in divine timing means letting go of the need to control the outcome and believing that everything will happen exactly as it is meant to in the right moment. This does not mean being passive or inactive. It means aligning ourselves with the rhythm of the universe and knowing that we are guided every step of the way. When we trust in God's timing, we release anxiety and worry, replacing them with peace and acceptance. Sometimes the path to healing or resolution seems unclear, and we may not understand why we must endure certain hardships. Yet when we trust that God's timing is perfect, we allow ourselves to surrender to the process. This trust provides the patience needed to wait for the right circumstances, people, or opportunities to manifest in our lives. Divine timing may not always make sense to us, but when we look back, we often see that everything happened for a reason, in a way that we could never have planned. One of the primary challenges to trusting in divine timing is our tendency to want to control everything. Our egos often push us to take charge, fix problems, and make things happen on our own. But when we try to force an outcome, we are disconnecting ourselves from the flow of the divine. We forget that we are not in control of everything, and this creates stress, frustration, and a sense of disempowerment. Cultivating trust requires letting go of the illusion of control and surrendering to a higher power. We must allow ourselves to be guided, knowing that the path we are on is leading us toward healing, growth, and divine fulfillment. Trust is about releasing the burden of expectation and allowing God to work in our lives in ways that we cannot fully comprehend. By letting go of the need for control, we open ourselves to greater possibilities and divine guidance. Gratitude and trust in divine timing also cultivate patience. Patience is the quiet strength that allows us to wait without resistance for what is to come. It is the ability to stay centered in peace while things unfold around us. When we trust that everything happens in its own time, we no longer feel the need to rush or force things. We learn to embrace each moment, knowing that what is meant for us will come when the time is right. Acceptance is closely related to patience. It is the ability to surrender to the present moment and trust that all is as it should be. Acceptance does not mean resigning ourselves to a life of complacency, but rather acknowledging where we are and trusting that God has a greater plan for us. When we accept our circumstances and trust in God's timing, we find peace in the waiting. We allow ourselves to be present in the moment, knowing that each step is part of a greater journey. As we move through the process of healing, whether emotional, physical, or spiritual, gratitude and trust become essential companions. Gratitude allows us to acknowledge the growth and progress we are making, even if it feels slow. Trust enables us to hold on when the road gets tough, knowing that God is leading us to a place of greater peace and fulfillment. These two practices help us stay grounded and connected to the divine, even when things seem uncertain. When we cultivate gratitude and trust, we are practicing surrender and faith. We acknowledge that the process of healing and transformation is in God's hands. We trust that, in His time, all things will work together for our highest good. Gratitude helps us focus on the positive, and trust helps us accept the unfolding of our journey, no matter where it leads. Together, they bring us closer to God's heart, allowing His healing presence to flow through us. Cultivating gratitude and trusting in divine timing are essential components of healing and reconnection with God. When we express gratitude, we open our hearts to the abundance of blessings around us, and when we trust in divine timing, we surrender to the greater plan that God has for our lives. These two practices allow us to release anxiety, impatience, and fear, and instead embrace peace, patience, and acceptance. By living with gratitude and trust, we align ourselves with the flow of the divine, knowing that everything is unfolding perfectly just as it should be. Through this process, we heal, we grow, and we return to God with a heart full of faith and love.